Yo, YouTube, what's up with your boy? Sports and Fitness Rants. I'm back, guys. Click that like button. Subscribe to my channel. What's up, y'all? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Got another great video for you guys today. As usual, man, you guys know the deal on this channel. It's all about setting the record straight, stopping the lies, stopping the narratives, stopping them from rewriting history, guys. And in this video, I want to do a video on some comments I heard from Andy Roddick. He's a retired tennis player. He was probably big in the early 2000s. You know, maybe some of you guys don't remember him. He's not really like a big time, all-time great tennis player. But as far as American, born tennis players, like I said, he was pretty big in the early 2000s. But I want to focus on some comments that he made that I guess Stephen A. Smith took issue with about this guy, Andy Roddick, claiming that tennis players, that's right, guys, tennis players are the greatest athletes in all sports. This dude really said that. Andy Roddick said that the tennis players are the greatest athletes. And we're going to talk about this video because this man is delusional. Delusional to think that and just even say that doesn't make any sense, man. We're going to talk about this video. Stephen A. Smith, I guess, talked about these comments on First Take. That's how I saw or I heard about this. Excuse me, guys. And I want to thank you guys, everyone across the world, everyone across the states has been supporting my channel. Once again, guys, I am truly, truly humbled by all support, man. It really means a lot. Like I said, real recognize real. All the true fans that continue to stand up, like I said, and support this channel, it means a lot, guys. Thank you very much. Shout out to everybody in the membership, man. And you guys know what to do. Turn the volume all the way up. Hit that play button. Remember, these videos are for educational purposes. And let's roll. So, yes, guys, like I said, man, I wanted to talk briefly about these comments that I heard that Andy Roddick made and Stephen A. Smith took issue with, and I guess they were discussing this on ESPN First Take. I don't know if it was a couple of days ago, whatever. And I believe PK Subban was on the panel also to discuss these comments about Andy Roddick made, claiming that tennis players are the greatest athletes in all sports. I don't know why this man would say this. I don't know what compelled him to say or make a statement like this. Does anyone believe, just on the face value of these comments, does anyone believe that tennis players are the most athletic people in all sports? Tennis players? Now, let me first start off by saying this. This is not to say that you don't have to be athletic to play tennis or that tennis players are not athletic. But once again, guys, there's levels to this. When we're talking about sports and we're talking about athleticism that's required to play your sport, right? To me, if we're just talking about athleticism, basketball players are far more athletic than tennis players are. They have to be. I mean, just requirements of the game. The jumping requirements, the running requirements, the stopping and cutting, the back and forths. Not only do you have to do all of this stuff, right? You have to do all this stuff while dribbling, also being guarded by people. There's no one guarding you in tennis. And I'm not saying that tennis is not hard, because to be athletic or to say that one athlete or a sport has greater athletes than another is not to throw shade at that sport, to say that you don't have to be athletic or to say that that sport requires no skills. Because I think that's what Andy Roddick is missing here, or he's getting confused with. To say that tennis players are the most athletic in all sports is insane. It's an insane take. I don't believe they're anywhere close to that. However, there is a lot of skill required in tennis, right? There's skill required in a lot of these sports, but there's more skill required in some sports than others. And some sports require more athleticism than other sports. That's just the facts. If you think about baseball, for example, it's a high-skill game. Catching a ball, hitting a baseball, pitching a baseball. All of these things, man, requires a certain level of skill. That's why baseball players fail more often than they succeed, right? So there's more skill kind of involved in baseball to a degree than athleticism is involved. You could be a completely out-of-shape baseball player and be a designated hitter. You could literally make a living never playing the field in baseball. You could do that, guys. You could play baseball, right, and play an entire game and never field the ball at your position. That could be a typical baseball game. You could play left field, no one hits the ball to you, or right field, no one hits the ball to you all game in right field, right? You could play a certain position and never have to field the ball. I mean, the pitcher's on, guys are not hitting, right? Guys are playing the field good. It will negate you having to do anything sometimes. That's the weird thing about baseball. But there's a lot more skill required than there is athleticism, right? Anyone gonna say that baseball players, right? We're talking about in generalities here, are the most athletic people in all the sports? I wouldn't say so. I don't think anyone believes that. So I think Andy Roddick is missing the point here when he talks about, athleticism, and we're talking about athleticism versus skill. Tennis requires a lot of skill. We get that. I've never played tennis organized, but I've tried it before. And like I said, it requires a certain technique, a certain skill to swing the racket, to hit the ball a certain way. No one's taking anything away from tennis. No one's saying tennis is easy. That's not a real sport. But they're not the greatest athletes. Now, let's think about this at the base level here, because that's really where you're going to find out, and see the athleticism required for a sport. So when you're a kid, when we're kids growing up, and you're playing a sport, elementary school, grade school, high school, whatever it is, you're playing a sport. You guys remember the kids that played tennis in high school or junior high, elementary school, whatever it is. Do you remember what the kids who played tennis looked like? Do you remember the kids that played football, basketball? Do you remember what they looked like as opposed to tennis players or a golf guy, right? Some of these sports that require less athleticism, those kids in your school, they were the least athletic kids. And once again, it's a knock on them. Oh, these guys are... What I'm saying is those are the least athletic kids that you can remember growing up. As far as I guess I'll speak for myself on this one. As far as I remember, to me, the tennis players, the kids who played golf, to me, they weren't the most athletic kids. They weren't. They did not play other sports because they could not compete in those sports. They weren't good enough athletically to be or to play those sports. So they didn't. They gravitated towards less athletic sports, guys. That's just the facts. It requires less athleticism to be great or to be good at tennis. Whereas in basketball, you kind of need a certain level of athleticism. And like I said, it's not athleticism versus regular people. Let's think about the NBA, for example. The average height of a basketball player is 6'7", guys. That's pretty damn tall. When's the last time you saw a 6'7" guy walking around the town? Very rare. Have you ever seen a 7-foot guy in your life? Some people probably never even met a 7-footer. Never seen someone 7 feet tall walking around. Those people stand out big time. That's why I tell you, a lot of these guys that play in the NBA, they're only in there because of their height and their athleticism that they were blessed with. It's rare you see someone 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" walking around. That's the average height of an NBA player. So if we think about the size of these guys, which is a rarity in and of itself, and the way that these guys can move on a basketball court, these tennis players can't sniff that. Now, like I said, if we were to take athletes from different sports, soccer, hockey, tennis, golf, NASCAR, which I guess is considered a sport, football, basketball, if we take rugby, let's say, for example, right? We take players from all of these sports and we put them through a combine, right? A combine, if you guys know combine, like the NFL does, right? They put NFL prospects through a combine, a gamut of different tests to test your athleticism, your abilities, right? They want to see how you can move. That's what it's about in the combine. Can you run fast? Can you change directions quickly? Right? Can you accelerate? Can you make decisions on the fly? Can you catch the ball running at a certain speed? Right? All these kinds of things go into a combine. Right? They're testing your athleticism. How can you move your body through space? Does anyone believe that if we put athletes across all sports through a 20 different tests, right, of athleticism, whatever it is, shuttle runs, sprints, backpedaling, like I said, jumping over stuff, whatever it is, hand-eye coordination test, all this stuff, testing your athleticism, strength, speed, power. You take players from every league and you put them through a test. I'm telling you guys right now, the tennis players ain't coming out on top, man. They're not. They're not. And I'm not here saying that the basketball players are the greatest athletes or the football players are the greatest athletes or soccer players or rugby guys or hockey guys. I'm not saying here. The one thing I know for certain is that there's no way in hell a tennis player is the most athletic or the most athletic person in all of sports, guys. If we took the greatest athletes of tennis, in tennis's history, the greatest athletes that ever played tennis, and we took the greatest athletes that ever played basketball, the greatest athletes that ever played football, the greatest athletes that ever played hockey, or soccer, or rugby, baseball, any of these sports, you get the best athletes that ever play. Does anyone think that tennis guys are coming out on top? Hell no, man. Hell no. When you think about great athletes, athletics, No one thinks about tennis players, man. And once again, this is not a knock on tennis as a sport. Those guys are legit. They're athletes. They have skills. Tennis is a very hard sport. No one's taking anything away from the sport. But as far as athleticism required and what these guys can do, doesn't make any sense. Now, Andy Roddick made some claims talking about, oh, you don't see basketball, because he was talking about, like, he was calling basketball players out, which is weird to me. But he said that you don't see basketball players playing an NBA game for 4 or 5 hours. And he was saying that a tennis match could go on for 4 or 5 hours. There's no time limit in tennis. Yeah, so once again, that actually makes the point that I'm making. You couldn't play basketball for 4 hours straight, you clown. Imagine an NBA game being 4 hours long and these guys having to play basketball, let's say it was 30-minute quarters. That doesn't make any sense, man. That's the whole point. You can play tennis that long, right? You can do that tennis match for that long, right? You can't play basketball for 4 or 5 hours straight. They couldn't do it because it requires a lot more energy and effort and athleticism to do this stuff. I mean, my goodness, this is what Andy Roddick says, though. If we look at tennis, they have side-to-side lateral movement. No doubt about it, man. You know, sometimes they're playing on grass. Sometimes they're playing on a clay court, right? So we understand those kinds of things. Andy Roddick brought this up, that basketball players playing in an air-conditioned arena. Once again, if you're playing basketball professionally out in the heat, you wouldn't be able to do it. I play basketball in the streets. Anyone that plays basketball in the streets during the summertime knows, guys. If it's 80, 90 degrees outside, especially if there's humidity out there, it's so hard to play basketball outside in that kind of heat, in that kind of humidity. You can't even breathe. So once again, playing basketball, what's required of you to run up and down a basketball court. This isn't a side-to-side movement. Every once in a while, you have to come up to the net or something like that. This isn't the same thing. These guys are running around, jumping in the air, twisting their bodies, doing all kinds of change of directions, change of paces. It's insane. Like I said, what basketball players can do over the years, what they've been doing, insane. But Andy Roddick is talking about they play in an air-conditioned court. That doesn't make any sense. I can easily say, Andy Roddick, that I don't consider tennis a sport. Not talking about athletics. I don't consider it a sport. I can easily say this, and I can justify by saying, the crowd for tennis can't even speak. Does anybody respect a sport like that, where the people in the crowd have to be quiet for you? So, Andy Roddick, you sound like a complete hypocrite and a clown, saying that the NBA plays in air-conditioned courts, right? They play on hardwood courts, and that you can't play an NBA game for 4 or 5 hours long as a way to explain that they're not as great athletes as tennis players. Meanwhile, in a sport of tennis, the fans can't even speak. They got to be quiet. Every time these guys are getting ready to serve, what do you see? If they even hear or hint a noise, these guys look in the crowd with disgust. Yo, who's talking noise? Who's making noise? I'm trying to serve here. I don't respect that, man, about tennis. That's the same thing I don't respect about golf. You got to be quiet. Shh, everybody quiet. He's getting ready to putt. I don't give a damn. So you're telling me in an NBA arena where you got 20,000 people going crazy, screaming and yelling, they're waving those things behind the free throw, behind the backboard on the free throw line. So when an NBA player is at the line, you're telling me that the NBA should require the fans to be quiet? Hey guys, be quiet. He's at the free throw line in a high pressure situation. If he misses free throw, they lose the championship. Everyone be quiet. No. What do you hear? Everyone going crazy, trying to get the person to miss. That's what they do. They heckle people in the NBA. They don't heckle you in tennis. These guys will have you ejected out of there in tennis if you open your mouth and say one thing. These guys are sensitive tennis players, man. I don't vibe with that about tennis. Same thing in golf. These guys will look off in the crowd for disgust if someone makes a noise when they're getting ready to putt. Dude, you guys are supposed to be professionals. That's supposed to be part of the game, man. I respect that about sports. Fans yelling, the crowd. Think about football. These guys can't even hear the damn play sometimes on the field. It's so loud. You got guys false starting. You got guys getting off sides because they can't hear a damn thing. The crowd is, once again, having an effect on the game, on the players. But in tennis, you can't talk. You can't say anything in tennis. You got to be quiet. Let us concentrate because you guys are such great athletes that you can't have any noise in the crowd. But Andy Roddick's talking about the NBA players played in a air-conditioned space. Maybe you should ask LeBron James about those air conditionings. Did LeBron James cramp up during one of the finals? I had to throw it in there. Andy Roddick brought it up, man. So once again, man, tennis players, great skills for tennis players. And a lot of these guys are great athletes. No one's saying that they're not great athletes. They're not the greatest athletes, though. Nowhere close. if I had to take the greatest athletes, I remember growing up, I remember that there was a saying that they used to always say, and it went like this: the greatest athletes in the world play basketball. That was what I remember hearing a lot growing up, right? Not saying that was a definitive truth, but the consensus was the basketball players had the greatest overall athletes. Just overall athletes, man. Basketball players, for what they could do, what they were required to do in their sport, they show true athleticism. But once again, this is not to say that there's been, or every person who plays basketball is the greatest athlete ever. That's not the case. We're talking about a generalization, right? That's what we're talking about, in generalities. Right? When Andy Roddick says that tennis players are the greatest athletes in all of sports, he's not talking about every single tennis player is the greatest athlete. He's talking about in general. In general, he thinks that tennis players are the most athletic, and there's no way you can make that stretch. Point to a guy. Name a guy. And name a guy, Andy Roddick. I mean, this guy started talking about how long these tennis matches could go on. That doesn't mean anything. So tennis players have some endurance. Great for them. Like I said, they're athletes. They play a sport. They're professionals. But you're not going to see a basketball game go on for 4 or 5 hours because that's not capable. You're not able to do that. No one can play basketball that long. Not even the most great in-shape person can do this. Once again, what's required of you on basketball. And if we think about basketball back in the day, I mean, the only reason why Andy Roddick could even make these comments now is because no one respects basketball now. You see what I'm saying, guys? Even Andy Roddick, a tennis player who was an underachiever. Let's be real. Andy Roddick was an underachiever. Dude won 1 Grand Slam title in his career. This guy was number 1 for like 30 weeks. He was number 1 for like 15 weeks in 2003, I think it was. The dude got 1 Grand Slam title. Once again, not saying he's a bum or scrub, none of this stuff. He underachieved. That's Andy Roddick in a nutshell. But you put your finger on a great athlete that could compare with the great athletes of these other sports, respectively. So if we think about someone like Walter Payton or Bo Jackson, the Will Chamberlains, right, the Michael Jordans, these great athletes that play in these respective sports, Jerry Rice, some of these, like I said, these great athletes. I mean, think about some of the wide receivers, some of the cornerbacks that play in the NFL. These guys are insane athletically. These tennis players couldn't shine their shoes, man. That's just the facts. And when we talk about some of these other sports, these guys are doing this, right, through resistance. You think about the NBA back in the 80s and the 90s, the 2000s, the physical nature of the game. No one would dare make a statement like this, especially a tennis player. Make a statement like this back in the 90s or the early 2000s. You would never hear someone say this out loud and really believe it like it was the truth. Back in them days, because basketball players were respected more. They were seen as tough, right? They were seen as just greater than they are now. No one respects the NBA. It's an absolute joke. They don't respect the players. They're all soft. They're all floppers now. So in turn, you got a tennis player saying that tennis players are more athletic than basketball players. Insane. I remember growing up watching guys like I said, Bjorn Borg. I remember watching guys like Andre Agassi. He was like my favorite tennis player. Andre Agassi. And I was not a huge tennis guy. But I did watch Wimbledon when it came on because Wimbledon was like, a big deal. And I liked Andre Agassi because of his flair, his style, right? He always wore like the flashy clothes and stuff. I remember these commercials. He had like these, I want to say it was like Canon commercials. Or there was that camera from back in the day. And they would have the thing with him swinging the racket. I just liked his swag, man, Andre Agassi. But I remember, him and Pete Sampras, they always were going back and forth. And Sampras would always, come out on top more often than not. But you had a bunch of guys, Boris Becker. You had, what's his name? I think his name was Michael Chang. Michael Chan maybe, or Chang. I can't remember. He was the USA, the Asian USA tennis player. And obviously guys like John McEnroe. You just had guys out there. But of those guys I mentioned, does anyone think that those guys are the greater athletes than some of these basketball players? I mean, come on, it's laughable for anyone to say this stuff. It really doesn't make any sense to me. More often than not, I mean, like I said, from what I can remember from childhood, people who played tennis growing up, that was really all they played. They didn't play anything else. But like I said, the guys that I grew around with, the boys that played sports, more often than not, they played either baseball, basketball, football, all three, or a combination of those. Those were the sports, man. You get some hockey guys out there, but very few boys back in the 80s and 90s played soccer, played tennis, played golf. They just did it like that. It just wasn't a sport. I mean, if you think about hockey's an expensive sport, man. You need all kinds of equipment, all kinds of gear. So a lot of kids can play hockey. They can afford to play hockey, guys. And that's a reality for a lot of people, man. I'm only speaking from what I remember from the 90s growing up, how many parents used to talk about how expensive hockey was. I used to always see the hockey players in high school with these giant bags, all this equipment, ice skates, sticks, you have to supply all of this stuff. That's an expensive sport. So a lot of kids don't gravitate to those sports because they're expensive to play. They don't play it. Once again, if we think about these things, you think about football and basketball, hockey. These guys have physicality that they deal with. Other guys pushing on them and hitting them. I mean, to me, like I said, I don't know about the athleticism of hockey players. I'm not a big hockey guy, so I'm not going to speak to the athleticism or lack of from hockey guys. But I do, once again, understand the skills, the toughness required to play hockey. All of these guys are athletes. They're all athletes. They're professionals. But once again, there's levels to this. Levels to it, guys. And I don't ever remember thinking in my mind or seeing a tennis player and being like, damn, this is the greatest athlete I've ever seen. I don't believe so at all, guys. Like I said, they play in a sport where the fans can't even interact, can't say anything. They got to sit there in silence. They can only cheer in between the sets, in between the serves. It's an absolute joke, man. It really is. And we all know about tennis and the history behind tennis. I mean, my goodness, man. Come on. Andy Roddick, you make no sense. You gave no evidence to support this. Like I said, you can't name an athlete over the tennis history and be like, yeah, that guy right there, one of the great athletes of all time. I've never heard anyone say that a tennis player, one of the greatest athletes of all time. Like I said, it requires skills. Tennis is a hard sport to master. No doubt about it. I respect the sport. The side to side, I get all of this. But Andy Roddick, it sounds ridiculous, man. Like I said, if I had to put my finger on a sport that has the greatest athletes, I'll probably go with basketball or football. Like I said, to me, you think about some of the athletes in football's history, some of the athletes in basketball's history, and I don't think anyone in any other sport can compare to those guys. And like I said, it's not to say that the other sports don't have great athletes. But if I had to take 10 basketball players, just 10 average basketball players off the street, right? Let's say we went to high school and we took 10 basketball or high school basketball players. And then we took 10 tennis players from the same high school. And we put them out, like I said, through a test of athleticism. Who do you believe is going to come out on top? I'm going to take the 10 basketball players to come out on top of the 10 tennis players, guys. Like I said, just the facts from me. Just, of course, athleticism. To me, hands down. You guys know the deal, man. And that's pretty much what Stephen A. Smith was saying. He was saying the same things. He did not agree with Andy Roddick, and he believed that Andy Roddick was getting confused between skills and athleticism. They're not the same thing. A lot of these sports require different amounts of skill, right? But at the same time, these sports also require different amounts of athleticism. And some sports don't require much athleticism versus skill, while some sports have a balance, a blend between skill and athleticism. It's just the facts. If you have athleticism and skills, it's going to make you greater in the NBA. It's going to make you greater in the NBA. And a lot of these guys, even if they don't have skills, they have athleticism. They have that, as we talk about. A lot of these guys are drafted just off of potential because they're 7 feet tall or they're 6'9" at 19, 18 years old, and they might grow, and they have crazy athleticism. These guys can jump, they can cut, they can do this, change directions. All of these things that these guys can do at the size that they are. That's athleticism. That's just pure athleticism. Tennis? Come on, man. Just stop it. You guys know the deal, man. I'll catch you guys on the next one.